far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Welcome to another exciting episode of 100 ABC Women Fireside Chats. And in this episode, I'm very, very excited about this topic because I myself am a translator and a broadcaster, so I'm quite obsessed with language. So our focus is the spoken and written language, the verbal communication, which is used to convey thoughts, ideas, emotions, from the politics around standardizing language, indigenous languages and identity, wokism, gender pronouns. We're going to explore how the evolution of language, along with social political realities, informs the words and expressions that we use to define identity and messaging. So we have two excellent guests with us today. Patricia Kumbakisaka is a global citizen and a multicultural Canadian. She was born in Bucharest, Romania. She grew up in Athens, Greece, and she has roots in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Her parents were in the diplomatic corps, so she lived in different countries. And as a result of that, she is fluent in French, English, Greek, Swahili, Lingala, and Romanian. I'm exhausted just thinking about all of that. And so she has an academic and professional background in foreign policy, diplomacy, and migration. And right now, she lives in Ottawa and works as a case processing officer with the Government of Canada. Welcome to this conversation, Patricia.
Thank you.
And our other panelist is Alma Harris, producer, artistic director, playwright, actress, educator. She's known as an award-winning cultural and social activist. Her work promotes positive imaging of Caribbean and African peoples towards the harmonious coexistence of peoples. She's considered a pioneer in the field of Black theater in Canada. Her productions and experiential workshops have been experienced by literally hundreds of thousands across Canada, the US, the Caribbean, and as far south as South Africa. Welcome, Alma Harris. Alma, we're going to start with you. So can you just sort of contextualize for us what constitutes language, and specifically, the verbal and written kind? What is a language?
What is a language? Okay. Indeed, I ask, what is a language? Bees dance, they have a language to tell the other bees where food is. Ants, they have a language. And let's move it into the humans. We have a language. A lot of the academics, the University of Auckland and other universities, say that language started in Africa, which is where all people are supposed to have started. However, I also read one that said, although language started in Africa, it was a sound they produced. But once they crossed into what is now Europe, where the brain began to develop, that's when actual words and syntax happened. And I thought, dear God, they're still continuing. So what I want to do, though, to contextualize it further is we are all speaking English right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we think England went back thousands and thousands and thousands. No, it did not. In fact, AD 54, when the Romans crossed, Claudius crossed, that's when you start hearing about England. And then you have the word England actually said. The first writing of English, I had sent something, maybe later we can put it up, to show what it looked like. I didn't make out one word. They have evolved their language into what we are speaking. And so I want to talk about contextualizing it in the now. The languages that we speak right now. And who has the right to determine if it is a language and the politics of that. Because colonizers tend to be the ones who say, well, that's a language and that's not. It always amuses me when I think of people saying that, well, the African languages are, and they're not really languages, they're dialects, And then to talk about Afrikaans, which was born a few years ago, that's a language. So I'm really concerned about self-definition. How do we allow people to determine our self-definition?
Mm-hmm.
We're supposedly independent. Are we still now carrying what colonizers have decided to place on us? And so maintain that that is what we have to do to legitimize ourselves. Because educators will tell you very clearly, if you don't teach a child in their own language, you have just said, grandma, grandpa, mom, all the people around you are nothing until they become what the colonizer decides. And we have to be very, very careful about that. Later on, I will focus on the Jamaican language, which has been formerly known now as a language, and a book written by a number of us. And then also the Kweyol, Kweyol, from the African French countries. Although Dominica is supposed to be English, but we're really African French. So like Dominica, or Dominique, St. Lucie, Marie-Galante, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Haiti, and we go across to Mauritius, Seychelles. So I'll talk about that later and how we define ourselves in our identity.
Yes, because language is very, very political. At some point, we're going to talk about wokism and pronouns and things like that, where, there's a lot of politics around that. But I'm gathering that language, there are certain attributes that language must have to be a language, some sort of syntax and understanding of what words mean what to a certain group of people and the context in which those words mean what they mean, right?
Yes,
like that's sort of the generally
speaking, for sure. Language is language, whether it's written or not. It's a way of communicating.
It's communication.
How are we communicating with each other? Before we began to write this language. All the oral languages that turned into written languages all over the world, actually, China, India, Europe, what they used to do. England, the English we speak is Germanic, French, all of those put together, making it language. So I guess at first, the original people were said to be speaking a patois, a corruptioner, until they took themselves in hand and said, no, that's not what we are. And decided that they were going to be English and eventually became colonizers. And we, the colonized, following their steps.
Okay, so we're going to get back to that. And you are right in that many European languages have sort of cross-pollinated amongst themselves with a bit of Latin in there and some ancient Greek in there. And basically language is a living thing that evolves as it comes into contact with different realities and cultures, etc. Speaking of different cultures and realities, I am always fascinated by people who are polyglots like myself. Patricia, you are one. So can you sort of tell us how you navigate being a polyglot, speaking all these different languages?
Certainly. First of all, good afternoon, and thank you, Sarah, for inviting us to the event. And thank you, everyone who's watching live, my friends and family. So for my case, I speak multiple languages, and the way I maintain them is basically by continuing speaking them with the people that speak the language. So for instance, at home, I speak with my mom mostly in French, but we all also speak English, Greek, Swahili, Romanian, and Lingala. So again, with our Greek circles, we speak Greek with them. So with our Romanian circle, we speak Romanian with them. So it's basically just continuing maintaining the language too. And since we have that advantage to speak those languages, we also keep it at home. And we read books, we watch movies, we write. The writing part is very important because some of those languages I mentioned, the letters are completely different. They're not Latin letters, such as Greek. It's totally different. It does not look like the English grammar at all. So, for instance, with my partner, we always speak in Greek because he's Greek. So I don't get a chance to lose that language. I speak with him every day in Greek. And when I go to work, I speak in English and French. So it's like I wear these different hats in my daily life. So the importance is just keep speaking the language, keep practicing, keep watching movies. If you find yourself struggling with one of the languages that you don't speak as often, things like cartoons or even children's books could be helping as well.
Mm-hmm. You're lucky in that you have, there is a sizable Congolese Lingala speaking community in our nation's capital. I'm not that lucky because the Nilotic language I speak, I know I can count on one hand the people I know who speak it. And I'm not in contact with them every day. So yeah, that is quite a challenge trying to keep the language alive in your brain because, you know, language acquisition and language preservation for individuals has since language is a living, breathing thing, if you're not
Mhm.
practicing it, you will lose it.
Exactly,
You will.
exactly. Like for my case, I was young because I was born in Bucharest and I grew up in Athens, Greece. So I went to elementary school in Greek. So again, at a younger age, your brain does absorb quicker, but that doesn't mean that if you are older, you know, that you can't maintain those languages as long as you keep practicing in various different ways.
Mhm. So that's a bit of the sort of, you know, the biological and a bit more the technical aspects. And of course, yeah, the younger you are when you acquire languages, uh, the the better you're going to be at it. The thing is, you have to continue speaking it. I lost all of my Swahili, which I got from Tanzania, because French came on top, Flemish on top, English on top.
Mhm.
So yeah. So let's go back to, we did bring up our indigenous African languages. I'm a very proud Luo speaker, Swahili speaker. Ama, you are a Creole speaker. Can you tell us about Creole and its evolution and the politics around
Yes.
preserving it?
So Creole is spoken in the African French countries of the Caribbean.
Mhm.
I know St. Lucia and Dominica is supposed to be English, but we actually maintain a Creole language. Well, we know that the Africans were brought over and enslaved in the different islands, and the French colonized a number of those islands. The Africans had to develop something to understand each other and the French. And so you have Creole, Kweyol, it has an acute on the E and a grave on the O, evolved. It evolved from African languages, French, and in Dominica, Kalinago, the indigenous people. And even some of our locations in Dominica, our towns, like Maho, Kulibi Street, Koliho, Isa, these are all Kalinago words. Zandoli, which is a lizard. Aguti, I don't know what the English is for that. There are a number of nouns that remain as Kalinago. With the conjugation, our verbs are generally French, like aller remains aller. But when we go to conjugate them, I was speaking to, what's her name, Sonia Magloire Akpa. She's actually in Africa and married to an African. I spoke to her this morning, and she was saying our conjugations are really from African languages. We tend to use markers and prompts. So for example, mweka ale, ale remains infinitive, and ka says, I am going. Ka tells you I am going. Mwete ale, I went. We went trying to get the English. Mweke ale, I will go. Mweke ale Rozo, I will go to Rozo. Okay? Mweteke ale, I would have gone, you know, but so on, so on, so on, so. So every time we go to do a conjugation, we use a different word.
Yeah.
And so that's how you see the marrying. Now, because we had different indigenous people in different islands, there's a touch of difference between our Creole. Just like the Americans sound different to the Canadians, sound different to a lot of places in England, etc. And in France, I know there are different sounds. And then there's Quebec, again, a different French. And I know some people tend to put down the Quebec French. They don't really know where it comes from. In the same way, though, you speak and you understand each other. And so we speak and we understand each other. We have conferences with people in Seychelles and Mauritius in Africa and other places like that. Our music is called Zouk in Senegal. It's Soukous, you know, and Congo, Sarah
It's Sukus as well.
so Soukous there
Yeah.
too. So we share that. We have a festival where we use largely Creole musicians. Before it was only Creole. Now some English is slipping in. A lot of concern is about us losing the language, because the younger people, it's so easy just to pick up the language. We were talking about technology from the phones, from television, from the radio. And so some very often it's like they don't even know the Creole in Roseau and places like that. So what has begun to happen, Sonia, Gregory Rabes, Raymond Lawrence, people like that, they have the KEC organization, which is the promotion and continuation. And the government is trying their best to have that spread in the schools. In fact, they have developed a curriculum and they've done a pilot project teaching Creole in the schools, making sure that the teachers they choose, however, know how to speak it fluently and don't drop in English words. My mother is Jamaican, and when she came to Dominica, you had to know Creole. You couldn't speak to anybody. Sure, family and so on, yeah, English. But when she went up to Penville area, which is where we have our land, everybody spoke Creole. So we all had no choice but to learn it. And it was always referred to as a language by our father and our mother. It's very interesting. Always we were told it was a language. Mm-hmm. And we were expected to learn it. My mother learned it within 2 years. She was fluent, although she was Jamaican. So I think it's very, very important for us to understand the evolution. Like you said, Sarah, it's a living language. Language is living. Mm-hmm. It's according to what is happening. And it's also according to how you assert who you are, your self-identity. Mm-hmm. Because as an educator, I know that you try to teach children in their language. Here, we're English, but there are so many schools after school that keep you learning your language and sending the children home to learn all their stories and bring them back to the classroom and tell the stories from all the different parts of the world. That's what I used to do. So that they're proud of who they are. They have that definition of self.
Yeah, yeah.
When we allow those who colonized us to keep having the power over us, then our languages disappear.
Yeah.
And I want to end with that, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Amma. So, Patricia, you did say that you have a parent who was a journalist. I'd like to talk about, and Amma sort of brought up who gets to decide, you know, what qualifies as language, but who gets to determine what qualifies as a good standard of language? So here I'm talking about standardization and how language evolves through that. Do you have any thoughts on that? So for example, BBC English and Français Radio Canadien, Deutsche Welle German, and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. And definitely, you know, as someone who had a dad who was a journalist, and also my spouse who is a journalist in sports, I do see the journalistic language is very different. You know, when they write, both the language, the written language, and also the speaking language is also very different. It's all about the body, and the tone is how they speak. So if you watch, example, CNN, you watch CBC, like you mentioned, you see those journalists presenting the news, whether it's sports or politics. They use a different tone than they would use when they speak to you, you know, for when you meet for coffee or when you meet randomly at the mall. For instance, when I was interviewed by CBC Radio Canada and also CBC English, it was very different. Like, it's how I speak now, it wasn't the same, because it was more like this is also a very serious topic, but that topic that I was interviewed about was more like I had to speak about my work I did in the UN overseas. So it was very serious, and the tone of my voice was also much more different. And speaking also, since this is about languages, when you watch someone, a journalist, talking in French, and let's say the person, they speak English, you speak to them in English, you see when they switch to the language, their accent changes, their body changes. It's just automatically there. And I understand that, because I'm also the same way. When I switch, let's say, from French to Greek, it's a totally different voice, it's a different body language. So you do see that a lot in various different journalists from all over the world. And I had the chance to see that with my dad, because when he was a journalist, it was also during the communism time in Romania. So he had to do the different reportage in Romanian and in French. So it was, it's like he had two different hats. And also my husband, when he speaks in Greek, is different than when he speaks in English, when he does his journalism. So it's, it's very different. Yes, it's a very different. It's about language and the body as well.
And tone.
If I may just,
Yes.
coming off of what Patricia has just said, being also in theater, language is culture. And everything has its own culture.
Yes.
Yes.
And so the culture you were referring to, like as a journalist, has its own culture.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's according to who has the control.
Yes.
That culture is set. So in Dominica and the other Creole countries where we have our own Creole programs, the culture takes over. And the culture is not French. We're very clear on that. We don't use a French culture with our programs. We use our Creole culture with our programs. And we don't anglicize it either. So I think a lot has to do with who takes control. Who makes the decision? Are we allowing, when will we liberate ourselves from mental slavery, as Bob Marley said? When are we stopping from saying we're free and independent and really become free? It's not easy, takes time, but it's about who you are. I go back to identity, who you see yourself as, who you respect yourself as, and the culture that goes along with that.
So speaking of who determines, what is proper language in whatever language, you've got l'Académie Française in France. In England, I'm sure you have the equivalent of that, the Oxford Dictionary, where every year there's new words that are admitted, or become acceptable in, the regular parlance or whatever. And I'm sure in Germany you have the same thing. So what do you have any thoughts on the role of institutions on dictating acceptability of new words, new expressions, especially in this day and age when language is evolving very, very rapidly because of social media, for example? Either of you.
Social media. Sorry, Amma.
No, please talk on social media. I'll talk on that at all.
I was just going to touch base on social media. Does play a huge impact on language, definitely. Well, the way people write now on social media, it's very different than how, they would write, let's say, an email to their boss. But then if we look at the people who, even politicians or anybody who tweets, you know, they have like a different language they would use on Twitter about,
Yeah.
you know, announcing something than what they would use when they make a video of announcing, you know, a different change in, let's say, the government system. So social media does have an impact on language, and it always had. Like, I think even if we look back at how we would, you know, write things on, back in my days, it was MSN. So it was this chat thing that we used to use. We would write differently there than how we would talk. But now the younger generation now use TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. And again, it's like their own little language there, you know. Even sometimes I don't understand it, but it does have an impact, you know, because now lots of workplaces, whether we like it or not, we are using social media. So it's kind of like we have to understand what language to use on Twitter, what language to use on Instagram, what to use on Facebook or Messenger. You know, it's not the same language that's being used in all those platforms. So
Okay,
it does
so
have an impact.
yeah, so the evolution of means of communication, the technology, because
Mhm.
remember on Twitter you only had a certain amount of space. So
Yes.
the way
Yes.
you would express an idea, you had to really condense it somehow,
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
find a way to say a lot in very few characters, 140 characters or something like that,
Yes.
right? And so one of my pet peeves is, oh my gosh, the bane of my existence is the acronyms, the TTYLs and the ETA and the, oh my goodness, what are your thoughts on that, Amma, especially because you are an educator? Um, how do you navigate that?
How I navigate that, as I've said before, is that I'm 77 years old, and thank God I've got gray hair and I don't dye it. So when people communicate with me, regardless of age, especially the young ones who are fascinated that I'm still alive, they explain it to me. Because I honestly, I have not tried to understand. I've said, I've done my bit. You want to tell me what you mean? And they very patiently explain. In a way, I mean, on one side, I have to remind the young people that for memory and for substance and self-identity, we have got to keep that connection between all the ages. But I admire the fact that the young people are not waiting for an institution to determine what they use on social media. They make it up themselves, and we have to follow. You know, now we are following.
Mhm.
Yes, the institutions will say you have this amount of space, but even that has been expanded, because if they want the young people to use it, they've got to cater to them.
Mhm.
They have to cater to them, and they're not waiting for anybody to tell them what they can do. They're doing it.
Mhm.
And for me, as far as understanding, like I've said, they're very patient with me. They explain it to me. They know it. And if I'm in their company, they will use da, and then they'll say, Miss Ma or auntie or grandma, whatever, so and so and so and so is the case. And then they go back to their conversation, because that's not all their conversation is.
Mhm.
You see? So whatever they have to explain, that's how I deal with it. That's how I deal with it personally.
But do you not think that it promotes mental laziness, basically? You don't want to actually form a sentence, put a word together,
I
sort
have
of,
mentioned, yeah, I have
yeah.
mentioned that to them. I've spoken to them about it. I taught for a certain amount in class, and when you're a teacher, you don't stop. So even if I have a little group around me, we deal with that. We deal with, is that laziness? Is that, and they'll say, well, actually, we do make full sentences when we're on different platforms. When we're on these platforms, this is what we do. But for example, if they have to write an essay, they don't do that.
Yeah.
They write the full language. And if they're speaking to me, usually they don't do that. If they're sending something, I find it's usually age appropriate. So if they're sending something to someone who they know has said it back and said, explain, they're not going to send that to you again.
Ah, okay.
No,
So they
they're not
judge.
going to send that to you because you've established this is me. You
Yeah.
want to communicate with me. I want to communicate with you. Do you mind us like meeting halfway somewhere? You know?
Yeah.
And so they deal with that. So they don't only use that because I was very concerned about that.
Yeah.
This business about, you know, half words and no words and letters and saying, guys, come on. Even speaking, you know, to each other, I sometimes say to them, even if I'm on a bus, again, praise God, I have the gray hair. I'll say, darling, you're going out with this person. Both of you are on a phone. Just speak to each other. And
Yeah.
they
Yes.
just laugh. They cater me and they just laugh. And they say,
Yeah.
but that's true, you know?
Yeah.
Because you're concerned about the speaking together. I have to say that when I went home in September, and the relatives and came to see me, my older brothers, my younger brother, their children, the grandchildren, we all sat together. We didn't have any problem sharing. And it's a lot of us. So we didn't have any problem sharing it. Everybody enjoyed themselves and they spoke and then they explained themselves. And it was, and nobody used phones.
Right. Nobody was texting each other at the
Mhm.
table.
No, nobody used phones.
Mhm.
And I knew they were respecting the fact that there were people in the group that would look, they didn't want that to happen.
Mhm.
Plus, they hadn't seen me for a while and they really
Yeah.
wanted to chat.
Yeah.
So I think it has a lot to do with culture.
Yes. Okay.
Because
Yeah.
even here, if I'm in a Caribbean setting, the young people don't go on their phones.
Yeah.
Very
Well,
few of them. Very few of them. And
right.
if I say,
Yeah.
they'll put it away, you
Right.
know?
See,
And
you know
and
what?
they just laugh.
That's a language all by itself. You know, the cut eye and the kiss
Yeah,
teeth
yeah, yeah.
and all of that. That's a whole
Oh,
that
yeah.
that
And the
could be another
groups.
fireside chat that Black people use, that language.
Yeah, yeah.
But let's stay with social media though, because okay, so my 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 one pet peeve is the, you know, the TTYL and all of the abbreviating and just using letters and numbers as opposed to full words. But my other area of discomfort is emojis. Communicating with emojis. Like I've seen people who the sentence is an emoji, like their response, you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Patricia, your
Yeah.
thoughts on emojis and how the etiquette around that has developed and sort of evolved?
Yes. Personally, I would say social media has, this is just my personal opinion.
No, yeah,
It,
yeah,
it definitely has destroyed a lot of the way people write
yeah,
because, you know, there's lots of now spelling mistakes that, you know, people could write in a formal email because they're so used to, you know, writing that like this on Messenger, on Facebook, on Twitter and TikTok, whatever they use, you know. And that has an impact. And also emojis for me, again, emojis, I would use that only on social media. But if I'm at work and sending an email, usually I don't use emojis. But that doesn't mean that I'm upset at my colleague, you know, because I tend to write serious when I'm at work. But if it's, you know, just I'm texting my colleague outside of work and just writing something on Messenger to one of my friends, then, you know, I put lots of emojis. So for me, the emojis is kind of like another language where you have to read between the images, not between the lines, but between the images. So you have to understand if they put a thumbs up after you ask them something, it doesn't mean that they don't want to talk to you or they just lazy. They just said, okay, you know, but some people could interpret it differently. Thumbs up means like, okay, this person really doesn't want to talk to me. So they just send a cold emoji saying, okay, fine. You know, that's how I see the emojis. It's just images where you have to understand to read between those images. But at the same time, I'm not a huge fan of them when it comes to outside of social media platform but this is just my personal opinion. But if I'm on social media, I talk to someone, then I tend to put smiley faces. But again, if it's a work email, I just write without emojis. Yeah.
Could I
Yes.
comment on that? We
Yes.
have a family chat because we're all over the place.
Mhm.
And what I find is we are learning, the older ones, the middle ones, and the younger ones, we're learning to communicate with each other. So, so when the emojis, there's a little platform with emojis that tells you what it means, you know, and we go there and check it out. You know, there's a whoa boy, Auntie my school. She actually knows that stuff. You know, they don't use it a lot on the family chat, but they do use it. It's almost like they're patiently trying to teach us about the emojis. But I want to go back to them losing the ability to write sentences.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Yes.
taught for 15 years here, and I taught for years in Dominica. When I taught here, I'll be very honest with you, I love the children. We got along very well. I taught as if I was in the Caribbean, they had to stand up to talk to us and all that sort of stuff. But what I noticed was this. I taught science and theater. I know they're very different. When the children gave me a science essay or a science answer, and they had spelling mistakes, wrong grammar according to the English standard, wherever that's set, etc. I told the principal there's no way that I can give that child distinction, because I'm saying to them, it is okay when you go out there for you to do this. And so for me, because in Caribbean, you can't do that. Whatever the colonizer language is that you're using in the classroom has got to be perfect, or you're not getting the mark. Okay? What I'm not going to be, setting off on my principles. My principals met me halfway with that. A lot of the other teachers thought I wasn't being fair, and I said I'm being more than fair. I'm teaching them, here is English and French. You got to learn what is called standard English and French. And you can't feel that only when you're writing an English essay that you must write proper grammar and proper English, proper syntax. No. So it started from before those emojis and before social media. And our education system in Canada needs to watch itself. And they must not put the blame on the modern social medias. That's starting in the classroom. I taught for 15 years in this country.
Yeah.
I put my foot down and said, no, this is not happening in my classroom.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that up.
No, that's excellent. I have friends who are professors who have, second year, third year students who they just cannot write properly. And the problem with that is when you're in a post-secondary setting and you're trying to do presentations and present, complex ideas, you're presenting research, etc. How do you effectively communicate your work and what what the information you're trying to share if you can't even, master the basics? Patricia, do you have any thoughts on what Alma just said?
Yes, I was just going to add also another thing that now that's in the social media is the AI. That's another whole topic, now everybody, like when I was in university, we didn't have AI. So this was a long time ago. But now, there's AI in school and people, they can be lazy to write a whole paper, right? Or if they have to write something on the spot, it's an exam. Like you said, Amma, you may find some mistakes because again, they're used to being so attached, to the technology that does everything. And I mean, I'm not against the social media or technology. I'm very for it, but at the same time, we have to use it wisely. We need to use more of our brain than more of, something automatically that does it for us. Because it's good we have that tool, but at the same time, just because we have it, it shouldn't make us, more lazy, I find. So
Yeah.
it
should just be a tool, not
yes,
a crutch and something that
exactly.
completely sort of lets you off the hook of having to do that heavy lifting, the
Exactly.
intellectual heavy lifting.
And
Exactly.
again,
Exactly.
it might look like it's allowing you to be lazy, but it's really a means of control.
Oh,
Who's controlling? Yeah, who's
okay.
controlling that AI? Who's controlling what is being said? Who is saying it's okay for you to do that? Because there are people who are writing this. There are people who are in charge of the engines. Who is really in charge of the engines? At Black Coast Cultural Center yesterday, we were discussing that and saying if we have to make sure that our memories are retained, we have to set up our own engines.
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
We must set up so that we are in control of what goes on AI, rather than letting the other people who are doing it at present determine how we use it, what we use it for, and what language we're using. And we've got to set up our own engines. And we've got to communicate with each other on our engines.
Yes.
So that I have an engine, you have an, and we don't know what's happening. And that's not how it goes. If we are going to be united for real, we have to communicate. I don't even know if the word engine is what they're using. I'm the one using that word. But I'm saying we have to set up our own. We have to be able to communicate with the others because we have to control the information that goes in on AI rather than letting. I mean, when the word unity was used, English as a unifying force, it was like, right there, stop. It's colonization all over again. You know, and very subtly, when even the Chinese, you go in and they all know English, yeah, they know the Mandarin and Cantonese, but what's going on? I don't think they're fooling the Chinese either. They're not fooling the Chinese either. They have their own engines. But we've got to take in front before in front take us. You know, because if not, we're going to be lost in that. Again, the politics of control. Yeah, the
that's
politics.
interesting because we don't often think of language and its evolution in that sense, when in fact language is a very, very powerful tool to control messaging, communication, and people ultimately. Yeah. So I did mention in the intro about the evolution of language along with social norms and you know, different phenomena. So now we have gender neutrality and pronouns. So I can tell you as a translator, that is a big challenge for me. There's a whole science that has developed around gender neutral language when translating. I translate mainly into French. What are your thoughts on that sort of thing? The use of pronouns, gender neutrality, expressing, you know, new social norms.
I think we need to accept them. I would say I accept whatever is sent to me. I don't use them when I'm signing my name, but I accept it all because again, you have to allow people to self-define. It's going to be very difficult for a translator. I mean, that's difficult. That is seriously difficult. Because sometimes too, I find some people have used certain pronouns meaning well, and they've said something totally wrong. And somebody becomes very, very, so I don't try with that. I accept what is sent to me, and then this is who I am. And I sincerely accept it. I don't pretend to accept. I really sincerely accept because I believe that people have got to deal with self-identity. And that's part of self-identity. And so why would I not accept it when I want people to accept my self-identity?
Yeah, that's very fair. Patricia, you work in the federal government, and
Yes.
that's a huge thing in communications.
Definitely, yeah. Also the same as Amma, like I don't usually put that in my email, but if I were to ask, if someone was to ask me what you identify as, then I tell them what I identify as. But again, like it is a hard thing that you have to be careful, when you talk to someone, because you don't know and you don't want to offend or make anybody feel uncomfortable. So it is a language, it is a tough thing for translators. I can imagine for you, Sarah, when you, let's say you want to write a letter to someone, but you don't know what they identify as. So I do understand that, it can be very, very hard and very challenging, but at the same time, I only use it when they ask me, like, what do you identify as? Like, let's say if I have to speak at an event, but if I don't have to use it, I don't have to use it. But at the same time, I'm also very careful when, speaking to people that I'm not sure, not to assume a certain identification about them if they're not that. Yes.
Yeah, be open-minded, be accepting, and don't assume. Don't
Yes.
don't
No,
assume.
Don't assume. Exactly. Exactly.
Always err on the side of caution, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There's so much. There's so much.
I noticed that the time is going. I just wanted to
Yes.
deal with somebody I really admire phenomenally. She's now passed. Miss Louise Bennett
Yes.
from Jamaica.
I was just about to talk about patois and the politics around that.
Of patois, yeah. So Jamaican is a language.
Yeah.
It's not a patois. It's not a corruption of. As she said, when we do it, it's a corruption. When they do it, it's derived from. She did all her performances in the Jamaican language. She negotiated a lot with the University of the West Indies. There were some professors who were on her side, others didn't really refer to it as a patois. They referred to it as a dialect. And it did something about social class, and that's right through the Caribbean. Because anything that was established by Africans was put down, you see? And the new languages, the original languages now, like Creole and Jamaican, really came out of the African people who were dealing with these colonizers, and then they did have very good connections with the original peoples, the indigenous peoples. And you have the birth of new languages. And this is not the only book, but there's this book, Miss Lou and the Jamaican language. I wrote a chapter in it on the education aspect of it, of course. And children going to school with the first language being Jamaican and being told that's wrong. So you have just denied the child the entire being. Mommy is wrong, daddy is wrong, grandma is wrong, grandpa. All my neighbors, all the people I love are wrong, and so am I. So I become kucha. I don't know the English word for that, but I'm like, I guess, no confidence in who I am. Reestablishing my personality. If I am only something according to what the European says, then who am I? And a reestablishing of self. Again, Bob Marley saying, when are we going to release ourselves from mental slavery for real? And so it's very, very, very important for us to think of that. The Jamaican language is now officially a language. And talking about people slipping, they go in and out, in and out. They speak the English and they go boom into the Jamaican language, in and out of it. And it's accepted. They've been told that it is accepted. So that's taking control for yourself, making a decision on yourself, to liberate yourself. And so that I just wanted to bring that in because Jamaica has such an influence all over the world.
Yeah,
quite frankly,
for sure.
through reggae
Yes.
and
And
lyrics of reggae.
reggae now is part, has been officially recognized by UNESCO as part
Yeah,
of human cultural heritage
yeah,
worldwide. So
yeah,
that further bolsters the status of Jamaican, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Patricia, so you and I, um, because we're continental Africans, we've got several African languages in our linguistic baggage. Um, and then we're out here in a context where European languages dominate. And I've heard a lot of my friends and older friends who have children here growing up not speaking their African languages,
Mm-hmm.
or not understanding, or not understanding and not speaking. So
Mm-hmm.
what advice would you have in terms of preserving that linguistic heritage out here?
Yes, definitely. The advice I would give, especially to parents, is keep preserving that culture. Teach your child a song, the language, especially the food, something that they can pass it on to their future generation. Like if you look at my case, I've never even been to the Congo, but I speak the language. I know how to cook Congolese food. Not perfect like my mom, of course, but it's something that has been passed on. It's it's being continued to being passed on from me from my mom, and also being in an interracial relationship. It's something that we want to keep passing on with my partner to our future kids. They can understand both my culture and his culture. So my advice is, just don't let the language die off. Don't let the culture die off. Teach them as much as you know, as much as you were taught by your parents. Teach your children for them to continue teaching your children, and also teach them to be proud of who they are. That's really important, because I find, like, I've come across, Canadians who are of African descent. Okay, they were born here. It's good. They can say I'm Canadian, nothing wrong. I say I'm Canadian, but I say I'm Canadian, but my roots are from XYZ, and my roots are from Congo. And then, people ask me, were you born there? No, I wasn't born there. I was born in Romania and I grew up in Greece. But, okay, my story is a bit like global citizen. But at the same time, the blood that runs in my veins is from Africa, is from Congo. So I think it's really important for, people to continue that, teach that to their kids, to know who they are,
Mhm.
and they can continue that, because if you don't, then they won't know, and then the culture, the language, the knowledge will just continue to die off.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's very sad. Yeah.
yeah. That's a part of your identity that in several generations completely disappears. And my final topic, code switching. Code switching. Black people are so good at this code switching thing, okay? Because we have way we speak when we're amongst ourselves, amongst our Black folks, and we have our and our katai and this and that. We have our whole nonverbal language, and then we have the verbal language that we use amongst ourselves. I was talking earlier with Patricia about the different accents we have uh, when we are speaking with African French speakers, Caribbean French speakers, same with English, etc. So, what are your thoughts on the code switching aspect of language?
You want me to go first? Okay. My thoughts on that, it's very interesting, because if you happen to speak multiple languages, such as myself, and also yourself too, Sarah, if you're around those people that speak that language, you automatically, your brain switches. Whether you like it or not, it does it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. For me, I see it as a way that you appreciate someone else's culture, because first they can see that you speak their language. You're not mocking their language. There's a difference. You are speaking their language, even though, let's say, for instance, you're not, let's say somebody who speaks Chinese, but they don't ethnically look Chinese, but they speak broken Chinese. The Chinese people who they speak to, I'm pretty sure they would appreciate that this person is fighting hard to speak my language, in a Chinese cultural setting. So for me, I would see that switch code thing not as a bad thing, kind of as appreciating it. But again, it depends on how you show it, right? Like if you have an intention of, you are with your friends who speak Parisian French, then your French changes from your friends who speak Quebecois French, and it's the same language, but it's just different tones. So I find myself like this too. Like I have friends from Quebec and friends from, France or African different countries. It's very different French. It's the same language, but again, I have to switch my brain. And sometimes that's hard. I'm not gonna lie, it is hard. But again, it really depends on how you portray yourself when you do that. And I don't think code switching is a bad thing. I see it a way of appreciating, if you happen to know the language, the culture, the way the people live, it's a way of showing appreciation and kind of connection with them.
That's a good way to put it. Appreciation and connection, associated with code switching. Ama, your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, it's automatic as far as Caribbean people and African people are concerned. I don't find myself code switching with Europeans, but I code switch with my own people. I find it happens, like a lot of my friends from Trinidad. A lot of them are from Trinidad. And I hear myself talking when I'm talking to them, and I sound like them. In fact, a lot of people come and say, "Oh, but you're from Trinidad." And I say, "No, I'm from Dominica." And I tease them and say, "Yeah, you'd like me to come from Dominica, from Trinidad, but I am a Dominican." and they laugh, But it is something that happens automatically. And then there are the trans-Caribbean language, where you like so-and-so from Jamaica, so when you're speaking, you use it. You like so-and-so from Haiti, so you use it. And Caribbean people don't feel you're trying to put on or anything like that, Or there's certain things that come out better if they say it in Bajan, and they laugh. Like you're giving a Bajan joke. How are you going to say it? In English? That wouldn't work. But, so you try to, you try to identify, and that happens automatically. That happens automatically. It's like we're speaking now, and I'm seeing my hands all over the place. Like they say, if you tie the hands of a Caribbean person, they can't speak. They must use their hands. And I remember years ago, especially years ago, when we didn't have as many of us up here, we have a saying of what happened? That person think carnival start already. Some people, you go into the subway and you see somebody, and they really look like they're playing mass. You know what I mean? And you see somebody you do not know from the Caribbean, you just know they're from the Caribbean, and you look at each other and go, and you all both start laughing. You don't know the person, or you let out a juice,
Yeah.
And it's just something we all have. And then meeting a lot of people from the continent, I realized, well, that's where we got it from.
Yes, exactly.
The continental Africans do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yes,
the non-verbal language that we have between the Caribbean and Africa does this with us, links us. It takes away the ocean. And we realize, that really is where we're from. We don't have to ask no questions,
So I lied. I have one more topic, political correctness and language, and how language has evolved with political correctness, or quote unquote wokism as they call it now. What are your thoughts on that?
Define that for me, because
Political correctness, as in,
political correctness, I understand. Wokism.
well, wokeism is the new word in my mind for
Oh, I
political
see.
correctness.
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you find that that stifles language and expression, or uh, it is necessary in order to regulate certain people who just open their mouths and say whatever without realizing that, you know, the social context is such that you have to be more sensitive? What are your thoughts on that?
Mhm.
Patricia,
Or do you care? Or do you care?
I'm just trying to think of an example that I can provide. So, since the topic is about languages, maybe, for some people, for instance, a certain language can be heard the same to their ears, but it's not the same. So, example, someone is from Japan, but the person thinks that they speak Chinese. So maybe, like, the way I see it, since this is about language, so if whatever, let's say someone hears me speak Greek, which that has happened, they think I speak Italian, but I have to politely tell them, no, it's not Italian, it's Greek, it's not
Okay,
the
maybe I
same.
should explain better.
Yes.
I'm talking about within the same language,
Okay.
how over time there's certain words you just should not use,
Okay, okay.
so for example, the way to talk about single women, you
Mm-hmm.
know, like
Mm-hmm.
before it was a spinster. I think you even had to put that in your passport or something, spinster. Yeah,
Oh.
or on
Again,
official documents in some parts of British colonized, the British colonized, where, things like that, or how you say spouse and partner as opposed to, like I've heard people correct people when they say, this is my husband or this is my
Mm,
boyfriend. And they go, oh,
yes.
that's your partner? No, that's the husband and that's the boyfriend. Like, why are you trying to make me say partner? What does that mean?
Mm,
That's what I mean by, sort of the
mm,
political correctness aspect. What are your thoughts on that?
I personally think that people should be allowed to say what they have to say. Um,
yes.
if somebody's my boyfriend, they're my boyfriend. You, like, again, who died and made you God to decide that I must say partner? No, that is me.
I
No,
agree. I
I don't
agree.
stop anybody from saying partner. A lot of people say partner. I don't stop anybody from saying boyfriend, girlfriend, lover. You know what I mean? Spencer went out a long time ago.
Yeah,
And
right.
that word, like, that
Yeah,
is long time ago.
yeah.
Um, I think we need to if I know somebody says partner, I'm not going to say husband or
Hmm.
wife.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that.
Hmm.
And if it's two men or two women,
Hmm.
some people say partner, some people will say my husband or my wife, and sometimes they say my wife, and the other person also says my wife. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So to me, you have to really leave it up to listen carefully, hear what they say, and use that. But definitely nobody telling you you should use so nah.
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Patricia?
I agree. I agree with Amma. It's something that, no one should tell you how you should say it. You should say it how comfortable you feel. Like it's like how do I explain that? Like, I find it's a very big topic right now, because I feel like everything you say now, you have to be careful how you say it, because you don't want to, offend anyone, which is good. We don't want to offend people. We don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable, but at the same time, we do have, like, for yourself, I'm speaking for yourself, for myself, if we feel comfortable saying it this way, then we can say it. But it's my opinion, it's also not fair for someone to dictate me how to say it. You know, or someone dictate you, Amma, or you, Sarah, or anybody else, you know, you should say it this way. You should say how you feel you want to say it, because it's about you, right? It's not, you're not speaking on behalf of another person.
But there's some words that can be hurtful.
Yeah.
So somebody like, oh, that's a crazy person.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, so there's some words that I would say to someone, because you want to say that doesn't mean it's correct. It was never correct. You know what I'm saying? So there's some words that we have to be careful with.
Right.
Yes.
But there's some of the new things that are coming out where I think we have to be allowed people to say how they want to be called, how they want to be spoken to. And you have that right also. We both, so me and you have that right. You know that?
Yeah. So wokeism, political correctness, whatever, as long as there is a certain agency on behalf of the person that's saying and the person that's receiving what has been said, as long as it's mutual agency, then that's fine.
Yeah.
So Amma, I think this question is for you. Somebody's asking about Spanish-based Creole dialect, since you're the specialist in this area.
I don't know of any Spanish-based one. I know Aruba, Curacao, and those places, they have Papiamento, which is a language, and it has been a language for a long time. From what I understand from my friend who is from there, in school, as far as I know, up to now, they still teach in Dutch.
Yes.
But everybody knows Papiamento, and it's a language. And from what she says, it's referred to as a language. Okay, but I don't know about the Spanish.
Yeah, that would be interesting to find out.
Yeah.
So as we close this fascinating conversation, which could go on for many, many, many hours, what are your final thoughts about, the evolution of language and, how that impacts the human experience?
Good closing question. It's very big. For me personally, I would say that definitely language will continue to impact us in various different ways. And the important advice I would give is just keep maintaining that culture, keep being proud of that culture, keep passing it on. Language is going to stay forever. It's not going to die off. Culture stays forever as long as we continue to pass it on. And it's definitely going to be continuing to make an impact in the future forever. So it's something, again, that keep practicing it too, for ourselves, to just remember who we are culturally, our language, be proud of our roots. And that's all I have for advice.
And that's a lot. Thank you very much for that. And Amma?
Yeah, for me, the evolution of language is exciting.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. It's watching it grow. You watch the language grow. New words come, like conversate. I hear big conferences where people talk about conversating, and I think, yes, okay, they're having a conversation that is intense. It's like a dialogic. It's conversating. So there are a lot of new words springing up in so-called English language. For me, it's exciting. For me, it's exciting because I want to see people keep on defining who they are. For me, it's more than sad if you don't, because what you've done is just X your significance out of creation.
Yes.
And if you do that, you have nobody to blame but yourself. Don't look for somebody else to do it. You've got to deal with it yourself. You've got to get a team together and deal with it. It's not being dealt with. and making our own engines on AI, because that's coming fast and furious, and sharing the engines with each other so that we are truly independent of the other, and yet communicating with them. So for me, that is for the evolution of language. So I'm just going to read one of the chats. Respecting the person's self-identification ensures they feel a sense of belonging and feels included in any environment. It comes to back to respect and intentional wanting to be real human beings. Awesome conversation. Thank you for an amazing session. That comes from Christine Williams.
Yes, thank you very much, Christine, for that. You kind of stole my thunder, Amma, but that's fine. No, that's fine. No, and that's a perfect note on which to end. Language is a living, breathing thing, I always say as a translator. And you know, when I see translators in the federal public service who are not, you know, they're sort of just stuck in their, you know, the bureaucraties and whatever, and they're having to translate outside of that. And they don't realize that, well, no, you know, there's different types of languages depending on the environment. Your language is a living, breathing, moving, you know, evolving thing, just like humans are, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this fabulous, fabulous conversation. And I hope that those of you online on YouTube enjoyed it. You can watch it again. It will be uploaded on YouTube. And please make sure you share, especially my friends who are linguistics professors and fellow translators, terminologists, etc. I'm sure they'll be interested in this conversation. Thank you so much.
And I want to say thank you to you. You're an incredible moderator.
Yes.
I don't mean to steal your thunder. It's me and technology. I could read it. And so I'm thinking, I can read it. She can't read it. So I'll read it. Oh, but it's okay. I'll catch up. But thank you. And Patricia, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Amma, and thank you to everyone who's watching online.
Yeah,
too.
and thank you to Donna for letting this continue. The Fireside Chats are so wonderful. Yeah.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see